there are probably three, four, five mass shootings to compare it to the one good guy with a gun. You also have to take into consideration that these individuals who are armed, who are trying to protect their families or their communities, could also crack under pressure, as people in law enforcement are also cracked under pressure, and they're heavily trained. And the idea that we are supposed to just accept this because of that 0.1% chance, whatever it is, that once a blue moon event of some good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun is unacceptable to me.
The CDC recently released a statistic in which they found anywhere from 500,000 to 3 million defensive uses of proper uses of firearms for defensive reasoning when compared to the total 300,000 crimes committed with firearms. The number, that is a large disparity of numbers of people who are using guns to defend themselves and to prevent crime that is much larger than the number of people who are using guns incorrectly and immorally.
Well, yeah, I'd like to rebut. As I said, I am not against the idea of someone being able to defend themselves against a burglar or an intruder or whatever you may have, but I just find it funny that I don't hear those stories very often, and when I do, I think I am very touched and moved because I don't hear those stories very often. I hear stories of murder, 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 murder. This idea that somehow these option to stop all these gun violence issues is to put more guns on the street. Armed teachers is a proposal that the party, the GOP, has brought up. At what point do we think maybe we need to take a different approach? I'd like to know.
Republican. So, with regards to arming teachers, we're not saying to hand out a gun to every single teacher. If there's proper training that has been used, and if the teacher has used, say, if they're ex-military, ex-cop, or if they have a proper firearm training and can be certified by the school to carry a firearm, that we think that they should be able to carry within the school. We agree that, for the most part, guns should be kept out of the school. However, if there is a deterrent that a teacher can use to prevent mass shooting happening in school, we want to basically explore every single avenue in preventing that from happening. So we're on the same page, essentially, for preventing mass shootings from happening in schools. We just think that arming teachers would help that cause, where instead of basically leaving people helpless in the classroom, we're giving them at least a fighting chance, if that is the last resort possible.
Well, you argue that having more guns is the only way to defend against guns. I find that argument inherently invalid because currently in America we have more guns than we have people, and clearly that's not doing anything because we're having mass shootings constantly. And at this point, people are marketing to kids for bulletproof backpacks, and at a certain point, we need to say that enough is enough, and clearly adding more guns onto the situation isn't helping. We're adding oil to the oil fire. You're not actually fixing the problem. You're just putting a Band-Aid on something, and a Band-Aid won't stop the bullet.
So then if you're saying that more guns is not enough solution, is your solution to take away guns then?
I don't want criminals having guns or people who may have a mental illness having guns, but what I would say to your point about arming teachers, I have a parent who's a teacher, and they were never in the military. They've actually been on the receiving end of a gun before, never shot, but this, just a couple questions. Let's say, God forbid, a mass shooter were to open fire in a school, in a public school or a private school, and the police are called, and the police come to the school. What's going to keep the police from thinking that maybe the teacher who has the gun is not the assailant and firing at the teacher, leading to the deaths of the employees?
Well, I guess that would be the same issue if you call in a burglar into your house and you're armed with a firearm. The police can mistake you. It's a tragedy if it does. But I would rather have a chance to defend myself and have that chance, potentially if the cops misidentify me. However, I still wouldn't want to have that chance.
That's great that you'd like to have that chance, and that's what I think armed security is for. Anyone who's having a gun on school property needs to be in uniform for that simple reason. There have been cases of people who have called the cops on a burglar breaking into their house. They happen to be armed, they have the burglar cornered with the firearm, and the police mistake the homeowner for the assailant, and an innocent person is shot. So what you just referenced proves my point.
Okay, but that doesn't basically help out with preventing school shootings. So,
My question is, what prevents armed security from being mistaken and getting shot by law enforcement?
Because they would be law enforcement. I grew up in a town that had 2 armed police officers in uniform, so I don't think, if more police officers come to the school, they'll be like, hey, I know you, have you taken care of the situation? I don't think that's going to happen, especially if you're in uniform. If you're a teacher and you're brand new to the school, or maybe a student's never seen you before, and they see you have a gun on them, what are they supposed to think? I mean, does that not cause concern or anxiety?
Well, if a teacher is armed in the school, whether he wants for the school to coordinate with the police department, let them know what teachers have guns in schools. That way that doesn't happen.
I mean, I love the police, and I know that they have a million things to deal with, and they're not always going to remember what teacher has a firearm on them or what teacher has what on them.
I
So,
would also assume that in order to even have them have a gun in the school, they have to go through the police anyway. So,
what?
for the teachers to have a gun in the school, they have to go through the police department anyway.
That's right. I agree, but why can't this problem be solved with armed security in uniforms? Why does it have to be a teacher? Why does it have to be a teacher?
That's just one option.
Don't you think it's a little distracting? You know, if I'm chewing gum in class, the kids are going to be like,
I'm just saying that's one option. We're all for armed security. Have school resource officers. That's great. But we're saying teachers is one option here.
Okay, I believe we're going to move on to this subject. When discussing gun policy, at what level should regulation be enforced? Federal, state, local, or otherwise? Democrats?
We feel that this issue should be enforced on the federal level, given that the right to bear arms was written into the Constitution in an amendment, and so we feel that federal action should be taken to address the issue of mass United States citizens losing their lives as a result of a few people afraid to give up one civil liberty.
Republican?
We're actually in agreement on this, that it should only be federal legislation affecting gun control. That the Second Amendment, which is prior to the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment forbids the states from taking powers and actions granted to the federal government.
Wow, consensus. Okay, third point then. Presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke has famously exclaimed in Democratic debates, yes, you're coming for your guns. Though incredibly audacious, the statement represents the gun control, the statement basically represents the feeling of gun control around the country. What exactly are ways to mediate gun violence that doesn't infringe on the Second Amendment? Republicans?
One thing I would suggest is, again, having an armed populace. I mean, having a populace capable of protecting itself isn't, I do work police, but they cannot be everywhere. The best way to prevent evil men from doing wrong is that if they are afraid, that good people will stop them.
Democrats?
What I said was that the best way of preventing gun violence is to have an armed populace, a populace capable of protecting itself. Cops cannot be everywhere to defend everyone.
Well, the simple fact of the matter with that argument, while it does sound good, is that it just factually is not what happens. Mass shootings can happen in places where every single citizen in that town owns a weapon, and hundreds of people can still die because the odds of someone actually going into their home, grabbing their gun, getting to the place where a mass shooting is taking place, and taking down a computer and not harming a civilian in the process are slim to none. And
So why not enact nationwide open and concealed carry for that right action? Why not have open and concealed carry on a nationwide scale?
The concealed carry, that at this time I think is decided on a statewide basis.
Yeah, but for on a federal level.
What?
On a national level.
Well, that's one idea, but I think if one were to consider that, you might want to take a look at how that's worked out in the states that have tried that. A lot of those states have had mass shootings. Texas comes to mind. Florida has had mass shootings, and I haven't heard about the good guy. I'm still waiting to hear about this so-called good guy with gun. I mean, he sounds fantastic, and I'd love to meet him. But I'm just not sure that that's something that Washington would get comfortable with.
So can you correlate how these states that have open and concealed carry, can you please tell me the correlation between that and them having mass shootings? Like, how does Texas having concealed carry?
Well, I'm not saying that having concealed carry causes mass shootings. I'm saying
You just correlated the two.
well, what I'm saying is that it doesn't seem to stop mass shootings. This idea that the population is armed and you're allowed to carry in public doesn't really seem to stop these mass shooters from doing what they're going to do. So this idea that we're supposedly infringing on your rights because what you claim doesn't work is just, I don't know.
But the majority of mass shootings happen in quote-unquote gun-free zones. So
Gun-free zones in red states,
yes.
or nearby or in states that are right next to red states.
Yes, most schools and most shopping centers are considered gun-free zones, even in red states. And so law-abiding citizens will leave their guns outside of that area because they don't want to be prosecuted.
Well, when did I advocate for gun-free zones? I don't remember.
Well, right now you're arguing that mass shootings occur where open carry is present, but they don't. But what you are saying is that it does not necessarily prevent mass shootings from happening. So, because mass shootings happen in gun-free zones, law-abiding citizens, because you guys were saying that if a citizen has to go out and grab a gun and come back, that it's not going to prevent a mass shooting from happening. Rather than have that gun on that person, either in an open or a concealed carry, would help to prevent that crime from happening.
So being that mass shootings occur in gun-free zones, does that make it right?
No, not at all.
What is your point then?
That if it wasn't a gun-free zone, there'd be less chance of a mass shooting occurring, that someone would prevent that.
You're just repeating your same argument that the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and we've already proven to you that that argument just does not have a basis.
That's because these shootings happen in gun-free zones where people who abide by the law can't have their gun.
Okay, so what if we had armed security in a shop or in a shopping mall or whatever, would that qualify as a gun-free zone?
Well, no, because, not if the person who's armed is a police officer.
Okay, so if you want to abolish these gun-free zones, instead of having civilians who have minimal background checks and loops to go through to get these weapons, why don't we just have armed security and then you stop these gun-free zones, which you seem to be so against?
30 seconds.
Well, see, I'm not sure if you realize this or not, but even for a police officer who's off duty to come onto any college campus in the state, they have to get special permission from the university's police department to even bring their gun on campus. So I would say that a university is a gun-free zone.
Okay, well, it'll be BYOG, bring your own gun, I guess, right?
If you're talking about a police officer, that's what I'm talking about.
But you just said that if there's security with a gun inside a place, it's not a gun-free zone.
I believe we're going to move on to the next subject then. Thank you very much. All right, our next topic of discussion will be impeachment. As we're seeing in the news today, House Democrats have started an impeachment inquiry. Oh, you got to switch. Oh, yeah, my bad. Yeah. I wasn't aware of that. Oh, yeah, that's true. Round of applause to our participants. Great job. And thank you for your patience for my stuttering. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, check your mics real quick. Hello. Okay. Yeah, thank you. We good? Settled? All right. So our next topic of discussion, impeachment. Again, as we're seeing in the news today, House Democrats have started an impeachment inquiry due to a phone call by both
due to a phone call by President Trump asking for asking for a political favor by the Ukrainian president. Both the president and vice president have called this proceeding illegitimate. Is it, Republicans?
Well, my first point would be that House Democrats actually haven't begun an impeachment inquiry yet, at least not an official one. They haven't voted on one, and Nancy Pelosi...
They're doing their inquiry right now, and they've been calling it an impeachment inquiry.
Well, they have, but by definition, it is not. They are, however, sending out subpoenas.
You have to remember, I am not debating you tonight.
I just wanted to get that clear. But
is it legitimate?
I'd say that under the terms of the Constitution, any inquiry that the House Democrats decided to start would be legitimate, because impeachment itself is not a criminal trial. That comes after impeachment. And obviously the House is allowed to decide whatever rules they would like going forward with impeachment. But I would say it doesn't follow precedent that has been set with other impeachment in the past. So with Andrew Johnson or Nixon, it doesn't follow the precedent that was set during those impeachments.
Democrats?
The question is whether or not it's a legitimate inquiry.
Yes.
It is. As he said, any way the House chooses to conduct itself in this investigation would be correct, because it's the House's sole duty to conduct the impeachment inquiry. As for not following precedent, as he also noted, the House can conduct themselves any way they like.
Sorry. Yeah, you gotta be closer to the mic, fortunately.
It's okay.
So there is no precedent set under this administration, which brings to the point that any sort of inquiry that the House does is so crucial, because from there we will be able to determine whether or not what President Trump did does fall under the legality of what is legal and illegal. And so far it's looking to be more illegal than not.
Well, I mean, Mike's correct in that this has not followed any precedent whatsoever. I mean, this whole thing has been closed doors, in secret, with Adam Schiff running things how he pleases behind closed doors. I mean, like, there's no precedent for anything that they're trying to do right now.
I mean, so the best legal analogy, I think, as you pointed out, it's an investigation leading to an indictment, which is what impeachment would be. In an indictment, you know, before a grand jury, you don't have those due process rights that you would have in a trial, which would happen later in the Senate. So, you know, it's being done behind closed doors because a lot of this is vital to national security. And that's a complaint a lot of Republicans have had about some of the leaks coming out and stuff. But I don't see a problem with, you know, our elected representatives conducting an investigation leading towards articles of impeachment that will be public.
Well, what I would say to that topic is there's one very obvious place where this breaks precedent with other impeachment inquiries in the past, and that is that the minority party, the Republicans, do not have the right to issue any subpoenas under this inquiry, which obviously didn't happen in the past. During the Nixon impeachment, both the majority and minority parties were allowed to issue subpoenas, which gave the minority party a chance to defend themselves against any such inquiry, because with a subpoena, obviously, they could find information that maybe the other side would not necessarily want to be found during the inquiry.
I recognize that, and I think the narrowly tailored focus of this impeachment inquiry on Ukraine is a little bit different than what we've seen for Clinton or for Nixon. As you know, we noted before, the House can make whatever types of rules that they want around this, and they're going to be doing it. The president has been pushing back. He's, you know, been trying to exert executive privilege. He's been telling people to ignore subpoenas, and I'm sure going forward they're going to have to work out some sort of a deal, which might involve expanded rights for Republicans in the House to and on these committees to maybe subpoena some people. But at this point, they haven't needed that, and witnesses have been appearing before the committees of their own volition.
You good? All right. So, should impeachment even be considered a partisan topic? Republican?
Well, I mean, of course impeachment should be considered a partisan topic. Impeachment is necessarily partisan. That is its point, really. Impeachment itself, the eventual trial in the Senate is obviously nonpartisan. It's a criminal trial, just like any other. But in this case, impeachment itself is mostly political, right? So it's usually whatever party is in power being attacked by the party that's out of power, in terms of the presidency at least. So during Clinton, it was the Republicans attacking President Clinton, right, under his impeachment. So it's pretty much necessarily partisan as a topic itself, because it always involves two sides fighting against one another.
Democrats?
I would just like to point out that the law is not partisan.
Right. The law itself is not partisan. That's what he was referring to if there was a trial in the Senate. But everything we have right now is pretty partisan on both sides.
Well, I would argue that it's not necessarily, I would not argue that everything we have right now is partisan, because as you all know, the transcript for the cause of Ukraine had been released, and it clearly shows how President Trump was trying to withhold aid to Ukraine unless if they would begin an investigation into former Vice President Biden. And I think we could, at least our position is that that is part of a high crime that would constitute impeachment, and obviously all high crimes when they're investigated and it's put on trial need to be looked in a nonpartisan matter, and all members of Congress need to uphold their constitutional duty. Okay. So all members of Congress, regardless if it's in the House or the Senate, need to uphold their constitutional duties and to uphold the law, because as Emily said earlier, the law is not partisan, and that we all have a responsibility to uphold the law.
I just wanted to add one thing. When we're comparing things, and, yes, impeachment is by definition a political action. It's done by the House of Representatives. It is political. It's a political process. It exists outside of the judiciary. I would even say that a trial in the Senate would still be partially political, because it is conducted by political actors who are elected by their constituents. When looking at this, the uniqueness of this particular impeachment inquiry, when we look back just to Clinton, that the evidence brought against him came entirely out of the Starr report, which was considered by many at the time to be highly politicized.
But he did obstruct justice.
Yes.
Clinton did obstruct
yes,
justice.
The focus of the and he was found not guilty in the Senate. But
He was acquitted in the
Yes,
Senate, but he
yes,
was
he was.
guilty in the House.
Yes, impeachment article go forward. The general public, if you look at polling from that time, they viewed it as a highly partisan and politicized thing, because it was peering into his personal life. And when you look at polling from the public right now, a majority of Americans support this inquiry, and I believe a Fox News poll had 51% supporting removal from office in the Senate, because this is not about personal private actions and things like that he did, but it involves abusing his office and pressing foreign officials to interfere in our election.
Republicans?
No, I would just respond a few things from the start, because you went a little long there, but that's fine. First of all, I wouldn't say that the transcript clearly shows a quid pro quo in any way, and if it does show a quid pro quo, it does not show one in direct regards to Vice President Biden. It shows one in regards to corruption in Ukraine, which was a very large topic during the 2016 election. Not here, but in Ukraine it was. I would also
That
say...
was based on nothing. That is based on a conspiracy theory that the president himself drummed up. Yes, he did. He drummed it up.
Would you then say that it's not worth it to investigate
It
whether
has
there
been
was
proven
corruption
that
in
is
Ukraine?
not indeed real. It is a conspiracy theory that was drummed up by Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump. Not worth looking into if it's indeed a conspiracy theory that was drummed up by the president himself. It was made up. Back to the questions, please. To the question.
All right. Well, I would say in the second case, it wouldn't be listed under high crimes and misdemeanors in the Constitution, because quid pro quo would fall under bribery. but a quid pro quo has not necessarily been proved. There is no smoking gun yet, necessarily, especially because the president himself released those transcripts, and I don't know about you guys, but I'd say that the president probably wouldn't release anything he thought would incriminate himself, just knowing who he is.
I would say, yeah, a quid pro quo has not been proven yet. If you looked at Bill Taylor's testimony yesterday, he said that he had been instructed in the back channel that was set up between Ambassador Taylor, Kurt Volkner, who was another emissary to Ukraine, and then Sondland, the ambassador to the European Union for Trump, to work through Rudy Giuliani to start pressuring the Ukrainian government. He said yesterday that it was his understanding that that Trump wanted to directly tie military aid to Ukraine with an announcement by Ukraine that they would begin an investigation into Joe Biden and his son. Today there was another testimony by a high-ranking Pentagon official that was going to be touching on this topic as well, and unfortunately we don't have anything out of that yet because Republican congressmen who were not on the committees stormed the room and held it, preventing the inquiry, the deposition to occur until much later in the day.
The testimony that you're referencing from Bill Taylor, the ambassador, what he testified was hearsay that he said that he heard from another ambassador.
Okay, I'm just saying, yes, quid pro quo hasn't been proven yet, but there is so much happening right now that this is something that needs to be looked into, which is exactly why this impeachment inquiry exists.
Right, which is why we said we agree with the inquiry. However, for us, there's nothing there to impeach the president.
I know, but they're still investigating.
Correct.
If you support this impeachment inquiry, then how can you determine yet whether or not you support impeachment? Because all of the facts have not yet been released to the public.
Because
However, what has been released is Trump's own words saying that I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine. I wouldn't say there's reciprocal necessarily because things are happening that are not good, but the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great.
Well, but your question was how can I support the inquiry but not actual impeachment? Because I don't have enough evidence, right? Are you not innocent until proven guilty? So I don't support impeachment because there's no evidence for impeachment.
We don't want to muddy the lines here. Impeachment is going to be that indictment to have him stand trial, which is where he would, in a courtroom, be considered innocent until proven guilty. But to support impeachment is to support this investigation to find out all the facts. Not to harp on Bill Taylor's testimony specifically, but I just want to point to this back channel that was built up outside of typical diplomatic channels. An argument that was made by President Trump, by his chief of staff, was that a quid pro quo couldn't have happened because the Ukrainians didn't even know that their military aid was being withheld. So how could, there could have been. But we find out that just a week after that call, high-ranking Ukrainian officials up to the president had been instructed to talk with Rudy Giuliani to try and find out whether, saying, yes, this aid is being held up, no, this isn't an error, you need to find this out by talking to him.
Republicans. So going back to where you were talking about how we couldn't support the impeachment, and also support the inquiry, but you can make an inquiry based on an unproven thing that based on something you want to prove, but you can't go through with impeachment unless there's evidence and facts. So we can still say that we don't support impeachment because there are not enough evidence and facts, but still support the inquiry because it's based off of something that is wanted to be proved or being looked into.
I understand what you're saying. I'm conflating, impeachment and impeachment inquiry because this is the investigation leading to that vote, which will indict him. And it is a fact-gathering exercise. They're interviewing people. They're trying to subpoena documents. The Trump administration is trying to stop people from testifying. they've been working very hard. In fact, they tried to stop Bill Taylor from testifying yesterday, and he actually defied the Trump administration and came before the committee. And I just would like, I guess, to kind of keep the conversation going, why is Trump trying so hard to cover this up before the investigation can be borne out? If he really is innocent, why is he trying to stop us from looking into it?
Well, I would say that I mean, what we've seen in the past is that it's normal for presidents and their administrations to try and stop people from at least answering the first subpoena, right, before it would go to a court and they would have a court order for a subpoena to come back when it would actually become a crime to refuse a subpoena. And it's actually quite normal because the office of the president is obviously highly political, and any person that goes out to answer a subpoena, even if their entire testimony has absolutely nothing in it that incriminates the president, it's going to look bad, right? Because anybody being called in front of Congress, it's going to look bad for whatever organization they work for if Congress is sitting there asking them questions and grilling them, right? So it's mostly political reasons usually that you would stop somebody from answering a subpoena. It's mostly just a little bit of a back and forth, basically. You don't want to just give it over to them because then you look weak on a political scale.
I mean, I would turn that around on you. I think it looks a whole lot worse to be refusing all of these subpoenas. And to say that, you know, this is normal, to some extent, yes, but the amount of obstruction and the amount of subpoenas being issued, the amount of trying to barricade this inquiry from continuing is not precedented. It's not normal. And going back to the optics, it looks a lot worse, you know, to be hiding from these subpoenas, to not be turning over documents, to be refusing to testify. So I would say that, no, it probably isn't that they're afraid of the embarrassment of testifying before Congress. It's something else.
Well, it also looks bad for the Democrats to be barring Republicans from issuing subpoenas. So it kind of works the same way.
I understand what you're saying. Looking at their conduct lately, I talked to you today about earlier today, a group of Republican congressmen barricaded themselves into a classified, like a secure room in the basement of the House where they were going to be doing a secret behind closed door testimony with someone about some pretty high-level stuff regarding this Ukraine stuff. They weren't supposed to be in there. They barricaded themselves. So I think they have been known to, if we look back at like what happened with Hillary Clinton and Benghazi, Republicans kind of go off the rails with these things, and they want to look in. They have been publicly calling to look into all these various 2016 conspiracy theories that would just sideline things. And I think it makes sense they'd be trying to divert in any way they can to protect the president.
3 minutes.
Okay, sure. Obviously, I'm not sitting here to answer for the representatives who decided to run in and barricade themselves in a secure location. I'm not going to defend that because that's undefendable. They shouldn't have done that in the first place. But to say that Republicans tend to go crazy on this stuff is a bit of an understatement. But also the Democrats tend to go a little crazy on things like this as well, as we saw from a 2-year Russian investigation that proved almost nothing in the end and only cost millions of dollars.
I don't want to get into the Russian investigation too much here because the impeachment inquiry that we're talking about isn't based on all of that. That wasn't a political venture. That wasn't House Democrats. That was an independent counsel appointed by the Deputy Attorney General. That was an executive branch thing, and that investigation happened entirely outside of the House Democrats' purview, and they weren't even in charge at the time.
I mean, going back to what Michael was saying about Democrats going a little crazy on this, there's people in your own party who've come out and have criticized the way the Democrats have handled this or don't support impeachment. I mean, you have a Democrat running for president, Tulsi Gabbard, who has said, quote, "If impeachment is driven by these hyper-partisan interests, it will only further divide an already divided country." I mean, she at least realizes that the insane things that the Democrats are the pace that they are going at this is just...
but didn't she later support it?
No, she's for the inquiry, but at the debate last week, that was her quote that she made.
Tulsi Gabbard only speaks for herself.
Right, but I'm saying that that's a Democrat who recognizes that things are getting out of hand.
I could quote you so many Republicans who would say the same thing about various Republican investigations over the years and about Trump and his administration's conduct in trying to block this investigation from going forward.
1 minute.
Is that it? Any rebuttals?
Before we finish, I just kind of want to go to the bottom line. If we look through all the facts, the testimonies coming forward, everyone basically in the country agrees that, this investigation should go forward the way it is now. People are going to disagree on whether he should be removed from office, but it's something that needs to be investigated. The facts right now suggest that Trump pressed a foreign government to assist him in an election. That would be illegal. To have them help him, if there was any quid pro quo, that would also be illegal. I think articles of impeachment will be filed by the House, and there will be a trial in the Senate. The impeachment inquiry is the House's most powerful oversight tool. It's a political action that exists outside the judiciary, and it is essentially an indictment. The investigation ought to be followed through, and
10 seconds.
the cover-up can be worse than the crime itself.
I believe it's only fair that the Republicans get a 30-second rebuttal.
So I would say that we both support the same thing, right? We both support this inquiry going to its full end, right? But on this side of the aisle, obviously, the facts aren't nearly as clear as you guys would like them to be. There is no set standard for what is impeachable except for treason, bribery, and high crimes and misdemeanors. And currently, I don't think that this situation fits any of those. So therefore, we don't support impeachment.
Okay, that's it. Awesome. We are going to take a 5 to 7 minute break. We'll be right back, and our next topic will be immigration. Thank you. Hello? Hi. We're going to start in about 30 seconds.
Hello.
All right, guys. All right. So our next topic of discussion, immigration. So in the past 2 years or so, we've been seeing news across the border about illegal immigration and child separation. And then news broke around 2017, 2018 about News broke about new camps going up, just to handle the immigration problem. Now, Democrats, this is a question that pretty much is the same as the first question. What does comprehensive immigration reform look like in regards, given those factors right there?
Well, we'd just like to preface this by saying that we'd like to talk about facts this time and not conspiracies.
So to start off, I'd just like to put the context here that what we're seeing now under this administration it's been a major humanitarian crisis, one of the worst that we've had in the United States. Close to 3,000 children were separated in just a 2-month period in 2018. We still don't have the full numbers because the administration doesn't release them or because they don't know because they need to be tracked. In terms of what actual immigration reform would look like, for starters, we would have to recognize that there needs to be a clear path to citizenship for immigrants who are here, who are contributing to society, and who do not commit crimes. And the reality is that the vast majority of undocumented immigrants, allowing them to become part of the economy, to pay taxes, would be a major, major economic boon for the United States. There is no real economic argument against it. Even libertarian organizations such as the Cato Institute favors comprehensive immigration reform. And so did Republicans up until relatively recently. The Bush administration tried to pass it and was blocked by radical Republicans. The reality is that this used to be a bipartisan issue, and I'd like to see if maybe we could get it to be that again on this stage today.
Republicans, or your rebuttal?
So you speak of the humanitarian crisis that is occurring under this administration, and we will admit it is a humanitarian crisis, and it has been because it has been occurring even before this administration stepped foot into the office. It starts with the Flores consent decree from 1997. It's the Flores versus Reno case. It requires that minors must be housed in facilities that meet certain standards. So what does it mean when people are separated, and what exactly happens when separation happens? Separation happens when the adult falsely claims to be the child's parent, is a threat to the child, or is put through criminal proceedings. And number 3 is usually where we see children separated. And why we have seen so many separations occur, as he said, upwards of 3,000 children have been separated, is because the Trump administration has decided to have a no-tolerance policy when it comes to illegal immigration. This policy obviously hasn't happened in the past. We've had pretty lenient administrations when it comes to immigration, especially at the border, only concerning detainment, because I know that Barack Obama did really shoot for the deportation at times. So step 1 of the separation process is the Department of Health and Human Services takes the child into custody
and the adult is taken into custody by U.S. Marshals and goes through the necessary criminal proceedings. Number two, they'll typically plead guilty and are usually sentenced to serve time that day, but practices do vary across the border. Step three is post-proceedings, they're returned to the custody of ICE. Now, if the adult wants to go home, they are ordered, as they are ordered into in most cases, they're united with their child and sent home as a unit. So in that case, the time of separation is very short. Where the problem comes in is the claim of asylum, which goes right back to the Flores Consent Decree of 1997. Detained children, when they are detained, they may seek judicial review over the venue to challenge their placement or noncompliance of the facility with certain standards. So this leads me to the answer, what exactly does immigration reform look like? Well, one, you need to stop pointing your fingers at the administration and point your fingers at Congress, because who makes our laws? Congress. We don't live under a monarch who decides to, fix the immigration system when he wants to. We need Congress to work with the executive branch and not against the executive branch. Every time President Trump or Republicans in Congress come up with something, Democrats shake their head and say, no, I don't want your wall, we don't want to talk. Republicans keep coming to the table with ideas. So when are Democrats going to start taking these ideas into consideration and maybe having a talk across the aisle and stop playing politics?
So was it playing politics when Republicans blocked their own Republican president, George W. Bush, from getting meaningful reform? I mean, it's been, and then under Obama, I mean, it's been Republicans that have been proposing meaningful immigration reform, and then their own party, throwing it out the window. And one of your points about child separation, over 200 children were separated from their parents between May and June 2018 without reason. So, it's hard to defend, and it's hard to, what is the explanation there?
So you said it was without reason, but in 2014, which is considered an Obama era, right? According to the judiciary.senate.gov, they even said that the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California held that the Flores does not only apply to minors who arrive in the United States unaccompanied, but those who arrive with their parents' legal guardians. So if any child comes into the United States unaccompanied or accompanied, they get separated. That's literally what was described in an Obama-era policy. In addition, the Department for Homeland Security rarely detains unaccompanied children and their parents and legal guardians for more than 20 days. So when you say that so many people have been separated, they're not separated for very long, and when they are separated, they're separated under rulings that were conducted during the Obama era.
And just so we're not dodging questions here, the answer to that is for immigration reform, Congress does need to act on the Flores settlement, and they need to take legislative action and appropriate the funds necessary to help keep these detention centers up to the standards that the Flores settlement does require. And once the Flores agreement is either, legislated out of existence or fixed, either one I'm okay with, that is when Congress needs to act and start funding these centers so we don't have kids who are suffering from malnutrition and dying at the border.
Democrats, your rebuttal.
Yeah, so the invocation of Obama here, for everyone to know, that's called whataboutism and was actually the preferred propaganda tactic of the Soviet Union. And it's bad faith, but to that point, just...
And in terms of children not being separated for very long, sometimes that's the case, but now the Trump administration has instituted a policy that allows for indefinite separation, and many children have been separated for extensive periods of time. This is going to do long-term damage not only to their lives, but to the United States standing in the world. We used to represent a shining city on the hill, as your President Ronald Reagan said, and we have moved far away from that under President Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, you guys keep on talking about the legal settlement with Flores. Under the Trump administration, the courts have ruled several times that the Trump administration has to reunify these families, and they keep on missing the deadlines. They keep on stalling and not reunifying the children and keeping them separated, and this is going on for more than